Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. I apologise about the lighting. It is really dark and gloomy outside and trying to light my apartment at the minute is not working when there is actually no sun anywhere. So I do apologise for that. Welcome to my weekly wrap up for the week of August the 12th to the 18th. For those of you who are new to my channel, I do a video like this every Monday. Well, it's Monday here in Australia, so Sunday night Monday, depending on where you are in the world. And I talk about the books that I have read. If you're very familiar with these videos, welcome back. This week I read 6 books. I read 3 novels, 1 picture book, 1 early reader book, it's not really quite middle grade, and 1 novella. I read a total of 1,705 pages and my yearly reading total is up to 156 books. The first book I read this week was Night Film by Marisha Pessl. This one I was actually finishing off from last week, and as I said in last week's wrap up, I wasn't really connecting with the book, and to be honest, I really didn't connect with it in the second half either. Let me start again. Night Film was published in 2014 by Random House. I gave it 3 stars. I didn't really connect with the book. I think it's because I didn't really connect with the main character. There are a few views in the book that the character has that are slightly problematic, but I also think they're symptomatic of the character type. The main character, Scott McGrath, is a former investigative journalist who has basically been disgraced when he decided to try and tackle the topic of this very prominent and mysterious filmmaker, Stanislav Cordova, and basically it came back to bite him in the ass and he lost his wife, he lost his job and his reputation. A few years later, Cordova's daughter, Ashley, is found dead, supposedly of suicide, and Scott decides that he's going to try and find out exactly what happened to her. He believes there's a bit of a conspiracy going on, particularly with regards to Cordova's night films, these very violent, very dark, gritty, underground films that people really love, but no one really knows anything about the filmmaker. He's sort of never been photographed properly and he doesn't do interviews or anything like that. So he decides to uncover it, and there's the mystery along the way, and you know, there's suggestions of paranormal intent and all sorts of things. It didn't sit well with me. I think it took too long to get to the point. I think that's probably the main thing, and the fact that I didn't really connect with Scott as a main character, and male lead characters tend to be hit or miss with me, and this was sort of a miss. I mean, it's really interesting the way the book's told. It is told through traditional narrative, but it's also told through newspaper articles and photographs and things like that. So that part's really interesting. I don't think it's been as well executed as I've seen in other books. So 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Cicada by Shaun. Shaun is one of my favourite children's picture book authors and illustrators. He does amazing work, and his books are really not intended for very young children. They are quite deep and you do need to unpack them quite a bit. This was published this year by Lothian and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The main character of the story is the cicada, and I'm going to read you the blurb. Cicada tells story good, story simple, story even human can understand. Talk, talk, talk. And the entire book is told in that sort of almost haiku style the whole way through the book. And it is about Cicada, who works in a human office building. He's worked there for 17 years. He is a tireless worker. He doesn't take sick days. He does his job. Unfortunately, he's bullied and he's unappreciated and he's taken advantage of in his job until he retires, and then it's very unceremonious. He sort of has to clean out his desk and go, and then at the end of the story, he's going up onto the rooftop and then something magical happens. The way that you interpret this story, I think, is really going to depend on your own experiences. Kids probably won't understand it as much. I think adults will take a whole lot from it. And I was listening to Shaun speak and I was reading some of the stuff on his website about this book, and I think it is really up to the reader to interpret what it means to them. And I know it's not going to be for everyone. I love the way Shaun tells stories because they're never straightforward, they're never simple, and they're not books that give you the answers in the story. You have to interpret them, and I think that's why I love him so much. So if you've never read Shaun, he's got an amazing backlist collection. I probably wouldn't start with Cicada, but I would recommend it if you do enjoy his books. Then I read Henrietta and the Perfect Night by Martine Murray. This was published last year in 2017 by Allen and Unwin. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This was one of the shortlisted books for the younger readers category for the Children's Book Council of Australia Awards this year. It was also the last book that I had to read from that shortlist. My school library finally got it in, so I grabbed it and said I'd bring it back at some point, but now I'm planning on reading it to my class. Henrietta is a very precocious and curious and inquisitive little girl. She's about 5 years old, I think. I don't think it's explicitly stated in the book, but one of the stories in here, because there's 5 different connected stories. One of the stories is about her going to school for the very first time, which is about 5 years old here in Australia. She calls herself a go-getter and she's quite a positive, resilient child. All of the stories in here follow the thread of her mother being pregnant, and it's the first sibling that Henrietta will have, so she's very curious about the process and she's very impatient about meeting her younger brother or her younger sister. Then she starts school and she's very reluctant to go to school because it's going to change everything. And I actually really loved the school story because in there she almost tricks herself into staying at school because she's convinced her mother that they're just going to spy on everyone and they're just going to see what it's like and then they're going to go home. And then she sees another young girl who is quite distraught by the school process and her mother's already gone. So she decides that she's going to stay and she's going to help this girl and ends up staying at school and loving it. And I just thought that was such a beautiful story because it's very, very true. A lot of kids sort of do that. They get very anxious until they find a way to connect with school, and I thought that was a really beautiful one. So there's also stories about friendship, and there is the story of when she does get to meet her brand new sibling, and it's just gorgeous and I really enjoyed it. So this is a very cute book and I'm very glad that I read it. I also read The Ghost Bride by Yangji Chu. I'm probably butchering that, but this was a really beautiful story. It was published in 2013 by Hotkey and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It is a historical fiction with paranormal elements woven through, and it's set in 1890s Malaya, so what is now Malaysia. The main character, Li Lan, is a 17-year-old girl who has just found out from her father that he has been asked for her hand in marriage to the dead son of a very wealthy family as a ghost bride. If she goes through with it, she would be afforded all the same things that a normal bride would be within the new family. They would have a wedding and then she would become a member of that household and she'd be looked after for the rest of her days. This would mean a whole lot for her family because her father has quite a few debts and they're quite impoverished, but she is also conflicted because it's not exactly what she pictured for herself and the idea itself doesn't sit right with her. And then we get into these really awesome paranormal sort of elements where she starts having dreams, and then she is visited by the ghost of the man that died, and it's all very sort of ominous and she's not sure what's going on. And then she actually journeys to the afterlife, and that was the part of the story that absolutely gripped me, and I just couldn't stop turning the pages. I just wanted to read about it and find out what was going on. And then we met one of my favorite characters, Erlang, and he was my favorite. So I really enjoyed this. I am not one for historical fiction, you guys know that, but I do like it when there's some paranormal elements woven into it, and also this cover is just stunning. I also read Rogue Protocol by Martha Wells. This is book 3 in the Murderbot Diaries. It is a novella and it was just fantastic. It takes place right after the second book, as these books are. They're literally just going on and on. They're just snapshots of each step of Murderbot's journey. In this particular book, Murderbot has realised that the investigation into Grey Chris, the corporation that caused all the problems in the first book, is sort of floundering a little bit, and so it has decided that it's going to try and find some more evidence, because if that investigation closes down, then they're going to look into the disappearance of the sec unit, aka Murderbot, that has gone missing, and it just wants to be left alone and it doesn't want anyone looking for it because it just wants to be its own sort of creature. And of course it finds itself involved in a plot on another world where it has to save humans, and it's sort of wondering how it gets itself into these situations and why it constantly finds itself having to deal with humans who believe that it has emotions. It is just very dry, sarcastic humor, and I loved it. If you haven't read the Murderbot series and you like science fiction, I don't know what you're doing with your life. Go and pick it up right now. I should say this was a 2018 release from Tor, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The last book that I read this week was The Undercurrent by Paula Weston. This is a Love Osway novel. It was published in 2017 by Text Publishing, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed this, but I think it had a lot of pacing issues, and I think there's a good third of it that could have been half as long as it was in the setup. But it follows the story of Julianne DeMarchi, who is the daughter of a very prominent former investigative journalist. Julianne has a secret. Her entire body produces excess electricity, so she has this current that literally runs through her body and out of her, and she has very poor control over it and often has to ground herself, so she has to let go of the excess energy, and it's caused a few problems for her and her mother in the past. She crosses paths with a young soldier named Ryan Walsh and suddenly finds herself involved in this ongoing battle between a very prominent corporation that is trying to essentially force farmers all over the country and producers and growers to only use their genetically modified seeds and grains and animal produce, which is exactly what her mother was against for most of her life. But there's a whole lot of mysterious subplot and blackmail and things going on. And it was really interesting. I actually really enjoyed that side of it because I think it's very relevant to today. I just think, I think the pacing in the first half of the book was quite slow. Once everything got started, it was really good and I really enjoyed it. I wish the pacing had been a bit more. So these are the books that I read this week. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books and what your thoughts are on them, or if you're planning on picking any of them up. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.